Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi touts India as the growth engine of the world, addressing the BRICS Summit in South Africa.
भारत आज विश्व की फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग मेजर इकोनॉमी है। जल्द ही भारत $5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी बन जाएगा।
The countdown is on, with India's Chandrayaan-3 all set to land on the moon's south pole in just a few hours. As people here on Earth hold prayers for a successful touchdown. And Indian chess prodigy Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa is set to take on world #1 Magnus Carlsen again after the first World Cup final game ended in a draw. Now, the latest on DD India's BRICS coverage. In the latest update, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds talks with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. Take a look now at the highlights of day one of Prime Minister Modi at BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa.
विश्व की फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग मेजर इकोनॉमी है कि आने वाले वर्षों में भारत विश्व का ग्रोथ इंजन होगा। भारत के लोगों ने 2047 तक एक विकसित राष्ट्र बनाने का संकल्प लिया है। हम एक दूसरे की ताकतों को जोड़कर पूरे विश्व, खासतौर पर ग्लोबल साउथ के कल्याण में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं।
Now, the first day of the 15th BRICS Summit on Tuesday was characterized by how member states will improve trade, with agriculture and clean energy topping the agenda. The main attraction of the day were the addresses from the BRICS leaders. Addressing the BRICS Business Forum, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserted that India will soon become a $5 trillion economy. Looking ahead, BRICS leaders are expected to discuss whether new members will be allowed to join the bloc.
Day one of the Johannesburg Summit began with the visiting leaders participating in the Business Forum. The only exception was Chinese President Xi Jinping, who chose to skip the meeting and was represented by his Commerce Minister. Russian President Vladimir Putin was the only one to join over video link because he did not come to Johannesburg. While all other leaders showcased examples from their country's development journey, Prime Minister Modi highlighted the promise India holds, poised to become a $5 trillion economy soon.
वर्तमान समय में भी कोविड महामारी, तनावों और विवादों के बीच विश्व आर्थिक चुनौतियों से जूझ रहा है। ऐसे समय में ब्रिक्स देशों के एक बार फिर महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका है। फ्रेंड्स, वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था में उथल-पुथल के बावजूद भारत आज विश्व की फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग मेजर इकोनॉमी है। जल्द ही भारत $5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी बन जाएगा। इस बात में कोई संदेह नहीं कि आने वाले वर्षों में भारत विश्व का ग्रोथ इंजन होगा।
And India's aspiration of becoming a developed nation by 2047. He invited businesses from the BRICS countries to come and be a part of India's development journey and benefit from it. He spoke about how India is taking steps to become a global manufacturing hub in areas like solar energy, wind energy, electrical vehicles, green hydrogen and green ammonia. He also highlighted that how India is using UPI to make the most transactions around the world, with even street vendors using UPI, and how now countries like the UAE, Singapore and France are partnering with India's UPI. He highlighted India's vision of Make in India, Make for the World, especially in areas like IT, telecom, fintech, AI, semiconductors, etc. Finally, the Prime Minister called on the leaders of the BRICS to develop mutual trust and transparency and strengthen partnership between the global South.
मैं आप सभी को भारत की विकास यात्रा में शामिल होने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। कोविड महामारी ने हमें रेजिलिएंट और इंक्लूसिव सप्लाई चेन्स के महत्व को सिखाया है। इसके लिए आपसी विश्वास और पारदर्शिता बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। हम एक दूसरे की ताकतों को जोड़कर पूरे विश्व, खासतौर पर ग्लोबल साउथ के कल्याण में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं।
Later, the leaders attended the leaders' retreat, where important issues like strengthening partnership between the global South, climate change, cross-border terrorism, reform of multilateral lending institutions, etc. was discussed. With cameraman YK Loknath, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Johannesburg.
President Xi Jinping of China did not show up for the BRICS Business Forum held in Johannesburg on Tuesday. He was expected to deliver a speech along with his BRICS counterparts. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was present at the event. China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao attended the Business Forum instead. He read a prepared speech on behalf of Xi.
We have gained democratic independence through great hardship and sacrifice, and we have continued to explore a path of development that is in line with our own national conditions. All that we have done in the final analysis is to enable our people to lead a prosperous life. However, some countries, unwilling to give up their hegemonic position, have blocked and suppressed emerging market countries and developing countries, curbing whoever is developing well and tripping up whoever is catching up.
President Vladimir Putin of Russia virtually addressed the BRICS summit. He said the BRICS countries work for the global majority as they represent more than 40% of the world's population.
We cooperate on the principles of equality, partnership support, respect for each other's interests, and this is the essence of the future-oriented strategic course of our association. Of course, that meets the aspirations of the main part of the world community, the so-called global majority. The figures speak for themselves. Over the past decade, mutual investments of the BRICS member states have increased sixfold. In turn, their investments in the global economy as a whole have doubled, and their combined exports have reached 20% of the world total.
As DD India reports from Ground Zero, our correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh talks about the key issues that dominate the BRICS summit.
Let's talk about 5 key issues in focus at the 15th BRICS Summit. First, expansion of the BRICS. There is greater likelihood of BRICS inviting in new members to its fold soon. All BRICS leaders are on the same page as far as expansion of this influential grouping is concerned. Second, developing common payment system. Prioritizing trade in local currency and devising a common payment system is high on the agenda. It will help developing countries tackle the hegemony of dollar and euro better. Number 3, reformed multilateralism. Economic strategies must be implemented with the vision of placing BRICS economies at the center of sustainable global economic growth. It will require real reform of global governance institutions. Number 4, climate change and sustainable development goals. Climate crises need urgent interventions from the perspective of the global south. Financing, supply chains will have to be reimagined. It will determine the ability of these nations to achieve the sustainable development goals. Number 5, closer engagement with Africa. The theme this year at the BRICS Summit calls for closer cooperation between BRICS and Africa. India is already a principal development partner in the region. So those are the 5 issues to look out for at the 15th BRICS Summit. With Team DD India, Shubhendu Ghosh in Johannesburg.
Joining me live in the studio is my very special guest, Captain Alok Bansal, Director of India Foundation. Captain Bansal, welcome to the studio. If I can ask you to put the BRICS context in its proper context, for our viewers, in terms of deliverables, can we look forward to an expansion of the BRICS by the time the leaders disengage for the day?
See, firstly, there is no doubt that this BRICS summit has generated so much of interest, which none of the previous BRICS summits have actually generated. The reason being, the BRICS has emerged as a very, very powerful bloc. We now have quarter of global GDP, we have 40% of global population. And the 2 issues which are actually the main focus, likely to be the main focus as far as this particular summit is concerned, is expansion of BRICS and a common currency for BRICS. These are the issues which are going to be, and both are very, very contentious issues because as far as expansion is concerned, it has to be a unanimous occasion. And more you expand BRICS, less wieldy it becomes. But for an organization like this, expansion is a necessary requirement.
But you think the BRICS could grow too big too quickly?
Probably. If you need to have certain criteria as to who will become a member. You can't take anyone and everyone, because already we have a situation where South Africa is a very, very relatively small economy as compared to other members of the BRICS. So it's a small one. And now I think there is a attempt by South Africa to get in some more African countries so that African continent is fairly well represented. They are suggesting about Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa. You have Egypt, which is the most populous Arab country and North African country, and maybe someone from the East. At the same time, there are countries like Saudi Arabia, which is a very, very big economy, United Arab Emirates, which are big economies which are wanting to join. So there are a large number of countries which are wanting to join BRICS. Argentina is another one. But the problem is that it shouldn't become an organization where you have bilateral issues which start dominating. So one has to be a little careful before admitting. We need to have certain criteria. A country has a certain level of economy, certain level of population area, etc.
But Captain Bansal, do you fear that the BRICS is morphing from a purely geo-economic grouping to a geopolitical organization?
I think BRICS always had certain amount of political undertones within it, and I think economics and politics both would go hand in hand. And at this point of time, when Russia has been sanctioned by the Western world, and certain actions which have been taken by the Western world cannot obviously be justified, like SWIFT, etc. These are not actions, these were purely economic measures which shouldn't have been taken, because which has actually, after this war, there has been a constant urge from the global community to have alternatives to Western dominated systems. And I think Prime Minister Modi yesterday said very clearly that UPI needs to be made the global modus operandi as far as transfer of funds is concerned. And undoubtedly UPI is a big success story as far as India is concerned.
Since you spoke about the West, now there is a school of thought that some BRICS members want to change BRICS into as a rival, a political rival to the G7, to supplant it. Is that something that you would welcome?
See, some of the countries in BRICS may want that. But India has to tread cautiously, because India has very good relations with the G7 as well as it's a member of the BRICS. So India would definitely not want to position BRICS as a rival to somebody. And I think that is where will be our attempt, because we now have a situation where Russia is strongly pitted against the West, so much so that Russian president could not attend this BRICS summit because there is an ICC warrant of arrest against him, and Saudi Arabia, South Africa being a member of a country which accepts ICC's jurisdiction, could not have allowed them. So we have a situation where the polarization is increasing, but India has its role cut out. I think we are the one which are the bridge between the two extremes, and I think we need to take this grouping together, primarily as far as economic development is concerned, without causing too much of political turbulence.
All right, Captain Bansal, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsNight. Thank you, appreciate it. And joining me now is to commence any moment now. These are the latest visuals coming to you from Johannesburg in South Africa. Right, so if you're just tuning in to DD India's continuing coverage of the 15th BRICS Summit taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa, these are the latest visuals coming to you from this venue of the summit in Johannesburg, where we can see all the 5 BRICS leaders, with the exception of President Putin of Russia, who is represented by his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for a family photograph at the BRICS venue. And we are standing by, as I said before, for the BRICS plenary, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will deliver his address in a short while from now. Remember, as I said, this is the first in-person summit of the BRICS leaders since 2019. All the previous BRICS summits in the last 3 years, in 2020, 21 and 22, were a virtual affair. And this is the first time the 5 countries and the leaders are meeting in person in Johannesburg, South Africa, for the 15th BRICS Summit. So we are standing by for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech at the BRICS plenary. That's going to begin any moment now, and we'll get you live from Johannesburg here on DD India. News also coming in from Johannesburg that India is open to admitting new members to the BRICS grouping. Remember, there are 5 countries as of now: Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. And the consensus seems to be evolving on admitting new members, especially given the fact that 40 countries have expressed an interest in joining BRICS, and 23 of them at last count had formally applied for the membership. And all eyes now on the BRICS outcome document towards the end of the BRICS summit in Johannesburg. And on Wednesday, the BRICS leaders will hold a BRICS Africa Outreach Summit as well, followed by a BRICS Plus dialogue. Remember, South Africa, as a host country, has invited other countries too to this Outreach Summit, as well as the BRICS Plus dialogue. Now, a number of issues are on the agenda of the BRICS leaders as we speak, including but not limited to the expansion of the BRICS, and as well as trading or promoting or boosting local currencies or alternative currency. And these are issues that have bedeviled much of the world since the pandemic began in 2019-20. India, for one, is also focusing on clean energy, sustainable development, supply chain resilience. India is touting itself as the next digital hub, where digital public infrastructure can be a template for many countries around the world, including in Africa. Right, so if you're just tuning in, you're watching the latest visuals here on DD India from Johannesburg, South Africa, where the BRICS leaders have posed for a family photograph before the BRICS plenary begins. Right, it's 43 minutes past 2 p.m. local time here in New Delhi. And if you're just tuning in, these are the latest visuals coming to you from Johannesburg, South Africa, where the BRICS leaders have just gathered for a family photograph. You're watching the continuing coverage here on DD India of the 15th BRICS Summit taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa. And towards the end of the summit, South Africa will hand over the chair, the presidency of BRICS, to Russia. Right, we'll get you back to Johannesburg in just a bit, but shortly after touchdown, I'm told my colleague Amritpal Singh is joining us on the phone line from Johannesburg. Amrit, we just saw the BRICS leaders gather for a family photograph, and I'm told we are standing by for the BRICS plenary.
Oh, that's right. They're standing by for the BRICS plenary. We would expect the leaders to come in. They just finished the family photograph here at the International Convention Center, which is the main venue of the summit. So we are waiting these visuals. If you are playing them on your screen, everybody is standing by for the leaders to come in. Though this, I understand, is going to be a closed session, but the Prime Minister is expected to speak at this session. All leaders essentially make their opening statements at the plenary session, and later, once the leaders have spoken, they make interventions on particular issues that they wish to. We can see External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Foreign Secretary Vinay Kwatra, of course, the ambassador here, the BRICS Sherpa, Secretary E.R. Damu Ravi, who is also the BRICS Sherpa, and the team of the Indian officials and diplomats waiting for the Prime Minister. You can see the Chinese delegation, the South African delegation. The Russians, of course, do not have Vladimir Putin heading them, but Sergei Lavrov representing Vladimir Putin, and of course President Lula of Brazil. So after the opening remarks, as I said, they make interventions on particular issues of interest to them. Ramesh?
Amrit, as we are waiting for the Prime Minister to begin
Ramesh,
his
even as
speech.
I speak, can I come in, Ramesh? Even as I speak, we can see Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Brazilian President Lula come into the plenary session, and they are walking towards taking their respective positions right now, even as the delegations have stood. So we can see in moments from now the plenary session begins. Yes, Ramesh.
Right, so Amrit, as you were saying, the leaders are walking into the summit venue for the BRICS plenary. And as we wait for the Indian Prime Minister to begin delivering his speech as the plenary, Amrit, if you're still with us, walk our viewers through the remainder of the day's programs. We're given to understand that there'll be a joint press conference by the BRICS leaders at about 4 p.m. India time, followed by a press conference by the chair, that's South Africa in this case, at 8:30 p.m. India time. And the last event for the day would be a banquet at 9:30.
These times may be there may be delay in these timings, Ramesh, but you are right. Broadly, that's the plan. Right now, this is the plenary session, which once the statements are made, they go in for a closed session, and then they go in for a press conference later in the evening. And late into the night, we could have, after the state banquet is over, and the leaders, on what the leaders have agreed, the Sherpas thrash out the Johannesburg Declaration and put it out. So we expect the joint, the Johannesburg Declaration to come out late in the night. But that is the flow of events, as you told. There might just be a delay in the timings. Yes, Ramesh.
All right, as my colleague Amrit Pal was telling us, we are standing by for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to deliver his address as the BRICS plenary, and we'll get you live from Johannesburg as and when it begins. Right, Amrit Pal, if you're still with us, we were discussing earlier about the consensus building around expansion of the BRICS. Do we have any idea at all as to which new members could be added to the BRICS? All right, we lost that link with Amrit Pal. We'll try to get back to him as and when we can. But for now, still to come on DD India News Hour. China calls on Japan to reverse its decision on Fukushima water release. And voting is underway in Zimbabwe's presidential election.